People are sharing the creepiest unsolved mysteries that they can't stop thinking about. So I decided to look into the details of each one. Brandon Swanson's case always boggled my mind. The fact that he alerted his parents that he was lost and needed help. They were on the phone with him, heading toward him, only to hear his last moments. To know they were so close is so terrifying. By Danica Ramirez. Recently, Reddit user u-randomweeb asked the people of r/Ask Reddit to share the creepiest unsolved mystery that keeps them up at night. After reading through some of these, I will definitely not be sleeping soundly for the next couple of days. Here are the most bone-chilling cases. Warning: disturbing and graphic content ahead. 13. The murder of Robert 1. How was he supposedly killed so quickly after arriving at his friend's place, but was also so quickly cleaned up? Nothing makes any sense in that case. Here's what we know. In August 2006, Robert 1 stayed the night at his friend Joseph Price's house so as not to disturb his wife by coming home in the middle of the night. Joseph lived with his partners, Victor Zaborski and Dylan Ward, as a polyamorous unit. That night, they allegedly found Robert dead in the guest bedroom. He had been fatally stabbed 3 times. Victor called the police, and the paramedics arrived shortly after. Despite the stab wounds, police found no blood on Robert's torso, causing them to believe his body had been moved or cleaned. According to Newsweek, the 3 men in the house were also freshly showered and wearing bathrobes when police arrived. Jospe, Victor, and Dylan were eventually charged with obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and tampering with evidence, but were ultimately found not guilty in 2010. The judge explained that though she believed the 3 men knew who killed Robert, she was not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that they were guilty of the charges. When speaking to Newsweek, Jared P. Scott, director of the 2-part Peacock documentary Who Killed Robert 1, said, "The idea that there are no defensive wounds means, at some point, Robert didn't move. There's a theory about a paralytic agent. Why didn't he move? He didn't try to defend himself. He didn't have any signs of struggle. There was no blood. I don't know. Nothing adds up." 14. The Zodiac Killer, TBH. I'm sure there's more I don't know about entirely, but the anonymity of not knowing, or ever knowing, really, is unsettling. The way he would send things to the police, too. It's so scary yet so interesting to me. Here's what we know. During the late 60s, a serial killer who called himself the Zodiac plagued San Francisco. The Zodiac killed 5 confirmed victims between December 1968 and October 1969, but claimed to have committed 37 murders. On top of the brutal and seemingly random killings in the Bay Area, the Zodiac taunted law enforcement and news outlets by sending them encrypted letters and even calling in some of their crimes. According to Time, the killer went so far as to send a piece of bloodied shirt to prove he was who he claimed to be. In 1974, the Zodiac Killer stopped sending letters. In 2018, after authorities identified Golden State Killer Joseph James DeAngelo Jr. using DNA comparisons, police created a partial DNA profile using saliva traces from the stamp of a letter the Zodiac had sent. However, the partial profile can only be used to rule out suspects. Investigations surrounding the Zodiac went on for years, but the killer has never been caught. The case remains open in San Francisco, Vallejo, and the counties of Napa and Solano. 15. I know little about unsolved mysteries, but the Susan Powell case is so sad. Here's what we know. In 2009, Susan Powell went missing in West Valley, Utah. She was married to Josh Powell, with whom she shared 2 sons, Charlie and Braden. On the night Susan was reported missing, Josh said he was on a camping trip with the boys, while Susan stayed home because she was tired. After investigating the house, police found no signs of disturbance or physical altercations. As reported by ABC News, police found that Susan had left a handwritten will in her safe deposit box. In it, she revealed how bad her marriage with Josh was and explicitly wrote, "If I die, it may not be an accident." Despite being a person of interest, Josh was never arrested. However, on February 5, 2012, before he could take a judge-ordered polygraph test, Josh killed Charlie and Braden before he killed himself. Susan's body remains unfound. 16. I definitely have to say the Springfield 3 case. 3 young adult women disappeared without a trace and with no signs of a struggle. No one saw anything notable around the time, and no credible evidence has been presented since. Here's what we know. On June 7, 1992, the Springfield Police Department in Missouri was notified of the disappearance of 2 friends, 18-year-old Stacy McCall and 19-year-old Suzanne Susie Streeter, and Susie's mother, 49-year-old Cheryl Levitt. Stacy and Susie had graduated from high school the day before and were last seen leaving a graduation party at 2:15 a.m. They originally intended to sleep over at their friend Jane Kirby's house and spend the next day at a water park together. However, the two found Jane's house too crowded and left to spend the night at Susie's. Jane and her boyfriend went to Susie's house the following day after Susie and Stacy failed to show up at the water park. They found the front door unlocked and no sign of Stacy, Susie, or Cheryl, though all 3 of their cars were parked outside. A few hours later, Stacy's mother, Janice McCall, searched the house after failing to get a hold of Stacy. She found Stacy's clothes from the previous night, all 3 women's purses, and Susie and Cheryl's cigarettes. Janice then called the police to report the 3 women missing. According to the Springfield police, officers found no signs of a struggle in the house, but rather the appearance of the missing women being abducted. Susie and Cheryl's dog was also still at the home. To this day, Stacy, Susie, and Cheryl have not been found and have since become known as the Springfield 3. 17. Brandon Swanson's case always boggled my mind. The fact that he alerted his parents that he was lost and needed help. They were on the phone with him, heading toward him, only to hear his last moments. To know they were so close is so terrifying. Here's what we know. In May 2008, 19-year-old Brandon Swanson was driving home from a night out with friends when his car got stuck in a ditch. He called his parents to pick him up around 1 a.m. and told them he was somewhere around Lind, Minnesota. Brandon's parents remained on the phone with him as they drove to find him. About 47 minutes into their search, Brandon suddenly shouted, "Oh shit." That was the last his parents heard of him. They continued to look for him until 6:30 a.m., at which point they contacted the police, who didn't start a search until 12:30 p.m. Using phone records, the police learned that Brandon was actually near Porter, Minnesota, not Lind, and found his car off the side of a field. According to Unilad, there was no damage to the car or signs that Brandon was injured. However, the boy's body was never found. Sniffer dogs were used to try and track his path, but no remains were located. 18. The case of the Bowmont Children haunts me. 3 siblings went to the beach in 1966 and never came home. Nothing has ever been found. Here's what we know on Jan. 26, 1966, 9-year-old Jane, 7-year-old Arna, and 4-year-old Grant Bowmont went to the beach to celebrate Australia Day. Their mother, Nancy, allowed them to go with the promise that they would return by 2 p.m., since the children had been to the beach alone in the past. When they hadn't returned by 7:30 p.m., Nancy and Jim Bowmont called the police, and a search began. The investigation included hundreds of officers, and even the assistance of a psychic. According to CNN, witnesses would later claim to have seen the children in the company of a man on the foreshore at Glenelg, a beach about 20 minutes from the city center. Jim and Nancy continued living in their Adelaide home for many years, hoping their children would return. Today, the disappearance of the Bowmont children is one of Australia's most infamous cold cases. 19. Lastly, the Yuba County 5. Nobody knows why they took that turn, got out of their car, or left the shack. Nobody knows. There are only theories. To me, The creepiest part is that Gary Mathias was never found. Here's what we know. On February 24, 1978, 5 men, Ted Wyer, Jackie Hewitt, Gary Mathias, Bill Sterling, and Jack Madruga from Yuba City, California, drove home from a basketball game at California State University, Chico. They were between 24 and 32 years old. According to the Doe Network, each man had a mild mental disability or mental illness and lived with his family. The Washington Post reported that the parents of each of the 5 men called the police after confirming that none of their sons had returned home from the game. On February 28, authorities found Jack's car in a snowpack on a deserted mountain road about 70 miles from Chico State. The car was undamaged, but the keys were missing. When investigators hotwired the car, the engine instantly started. They also found maps in the glove compartment and gas in the tank. However, there were no traces of the men, and the snow made it difficult to search for them. It wasn't until June that a group of motorcyclists went to a trailer at a campsite almost 20 miles from where the car was found and discovered Ted's body frozen and tucked under 8 sheets. The coroner estimated he lived for 8 to 13 weeks after the men went missing. The next day, what was left of Jack and Bill was found on opposite sides of the road that led to the trailer, about 11 miles from the car. Animals had partially eaten Jack's remains, and only Bill's bones were found. Jackie's father discovered his son's backbone off the same road 2 days later, and an assistant sheriff discovered Jackie's skull the following day. Only Gary has never been found. The United States Forest Service maintained the trailer. It had matches and plenty of books inside to burn, a propane tank to provide gas and heat, and a locker filled with enough dehydrated food to last a year. However, no fire had been built, and the propane tank was untouched. To this day, nobody knows why the men exited the car, attempted the trek to the trailer, or decided to stay out there. If you or anyone you know has information on a missing person case, call local law enforcement first. You can also contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-843-5678, The Lost, or visit the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System site for regional case assistance.